Pessoal, bom dia. Hoje eu estou aqui com uma convidada que eu admiro bastante, né, o trabalho dela. Ela é a musicista Kati Rán. Ela tem trabalhos fantásticos, 2 álbuns maravilhosos. O primeiro foi com uma banda que se chamava no começo a banda Live, e o segundo que foi agora o trabalho dela solo, o Sala, que foi assim um trabalho fantástico. Referente, inclusive, tem referências à mitologia nórdica, principalmente a questão do lado feminino da mitologia nórdica. E nós vamos iniciar aqui a conversa com ela para a gente conhecer um pouco mais do trabalho dela, os aspectos dela como musicista, para trabalhar com essa temática. Kelly, thank you so much for being here in my channel. It's a big pleasure receiving you here. I think
Thank you.
probably some Brazilians will recognize your work because we are love to learn about North mythology, North music in many aspects, and I think your work are very brilliant, very beautiful, and thank you so much for being part of this.
Thank you for inviting me. And yeah, it's always good to know that the music travels over the world and that it can reach a place like in Brazil, an audience there, and that actually appreciates it. That's beautiful to hear always. We love hearing stuff like that. So,
Thank you. So for start our interview, how do you start your interest for make musics that are related to the Norse myths, aspects of that involve the myths of the Viking Age, and you doing this stuff that are related to the Norse music, but with elements of that put the past with the present. How did you start your interest for that?
well, my interest started actually when I listened to another group that twined history and old medieval and ethnic instruments into their music together with a message to consider nature to be sacred. And this is a UK Dutch based group called Omnia. They are currently not active anymore, but they used to create this almost pagan pantheon of folkloric music based on traditional music, also incorporated traditional melodies from various cultures that included Finland, the North, but also and mainly the Celtic repertoire, the Gaelic repertoire, and Welsh songs. You know, so basically anything pre-Christian, they did put to music, and meeting these people and eventually traveling with them, learning from them was really we're talking now early 2000s, 25 years ago, was really the entry point for me to getting to know all these beautiful instruments. Not only the nyckelharpa, which is behind me on the wall, it's a medieval string instrument from Scandinavia, from Sweden, but also many other things like how percussion can be created with stones and wood, skin drums, davul's, how they are made and played. So this group actually has been my gateway, and I would also consider them pioneers of the genre that is now called Viking music. They are of course more rooted in what they called at the time pagan folk, and that's something that also another group that I worked with for over a decade, Faun from Germany, also worked with. So uh, these two groups have been part of my roots of getting to know this kind of music, but also this kind of instrumentation. And from there, doing roadie work and merchandising work for them, and being their friend, and with one of them, a former partner, it was really in my home, in my life every day. And of course, even not being a musician myself at the time, it started to tingle. I really felt like, can I express myself? Can I express my kind of romantic ideas about what I think is beautiful, because I love to curate beautiful things, whether that's poetry, lyrics, visuals, sounds. And so that has always been part of my creative identity, and also doing that for other groups is to help curate kind of like a mood, or to help with research. And eventually, of course, you want to learn a little bit further, how can I make music, even though I'm not a trained musician. I didn't have a background growing up with being in choirs, or having had any piano lessons or guitar lessons. So it felt almost like an impossible stretch, but I just started. Like I started, and thanks to these two groups and the people of those groups, I had a very sweet entry point, because I could learn at home and with my friends to play on several of these instruments, and got their know-how into where to purchase them or build them. Now, where it becomes interesting is that I, differently than those two groups, was really inspired by Scandinavian fairy tales and myths. And I felt very, very much drawn to that, especially when I heard songs that were performed by other groups from the 90s, early 2000s, that came more from these regions. Finnish groups, Sweden Aika, Hetmengarna, or Swedish groups, Garmarna. And they were representing these beautiful traditional folk songs, world music. And I really felt like that's where I feel an identity connection. And same for what are now considered also the genre pioneers, Vartruna. I saw them in 2010 playing in a Viking festival in Gudvangen Valley, and I was so captivated. We were there with other groups that were also part of the festival programming, Faun and Valraven from Denmark. But when I heard them perform a little bit more solemnly, that really resonated with me. I felt like this is exactly where I feel closer into how I feel I also want to express sounds. And so my first project was called Leaf, stemming from that idea of wanting to reconnect people back to nature, to history, and to each other. That was like our band mantra at the time. And so I made an EP with Scandinavian folk songs together with Fieke van den Hart, a Dutch female producer. It was a Dutch group, and yeah, sort of set foot in that world through singing, which I had to learn because I haven't been a singer before, through playing. I already had played a little bit on the nyckelharpa and hammer dulcimer and bodhrán, the Irish drum, and some flute playing. It was really very startup, passionate, young band from 2010, I would say, until 2014. So it was kind of like short years, but really the period where we have seen kind of like this shift from a lot of groups being focused on more different cultures from the past, and Eastern traditional songs, and Southern traditional songs, and Western traditional songs, to suddenly the focus went up north. So I feel me starting up with my friends, the group Leaf, as well as the breakthrough of Vartruna and groups like that. Also Valraven from Denmark really pioneered combining Nordic traditional music, Faroese traditional music with modern electronics. There was kind of like this surge and surge of pagan folk music, or folk music in general, that incorporated old instruments. And then on top of that, we kind of saw that the aim towards the northern traditional music, or influences from the north, whether it be in the instruments or singing in Scandinavian languages, that sort of started to peak on top of that. Also seeing the rise of these TV shows, Vikings, the video games that came out in the decade after. So I would say that was kind of like a crucial moment when we actually talk about the popularity that this kind of music has today. And yeah, of course, everybody has followed their own journey into this. But I think all of these factors, all of these different groups on their own journey have contributed to suddenly there being a few acts that were kind of successful and reaching a broader audience, including in the end through TV or video game work, that incorporated all this beautiful instrumentation. And I think that's a beautiful thing, because when we started out, and when Omnia started out, when Fout started out, when I started out, there were really only a handful of people that played this kind of instruments um, in a way where the music also wasn't sort of stuck in only repeating traditional songs, but writing new ones and sort of making new material with it, and still having that connection to that beautiful ethnomusicology of using this instrumentation, but as well through sort of reviving and rewriting or adding new writing to ancient texts. And so I've seen that come up, and that's also what I have done. When I started with Liv, my whole vision was I want to do Scandinavian fairy tales, and I want to be able to use all the instruments I have at home. And I did not felt the need to only want to be historically accurate. So I had also other ethnic instruments in there, besides instruments that have been found in Scandinavian region.
Oh, that's fantastic. You have a beautiful journey in music. You have some begins with the learning about the instruments, about first have the group leave, and then you start to bring some things about ethnomusicology, and this is fantastic, because I think your music are very complement with many other things that are, how can I say, that bring us a beautiful sound. The voice, the mix of with instruments are, I think, is a great thing. It's fantastic when you put this together and do this type of sound. It's amazing.
Yeah, I think it's something that we all really felt as sort of like a community, that we wanted to express ourselves with playing, almost like kids in the Garden of Eden, with all these beautiful instruments.
Mhm.
And also I think it's coming in a time where people really, or at least I really felt I wanted to have a place where I can help curate something more beautiful than the city life and the concrete gray bricks we have, surrounding us every day. So it is, maybe it's a bit romanticizing, but it is also like I would say, a counter energy against everything that sort of wants to mold us into a machinery of sorts in modern life. And doing this kind of music, or being in any case in communities that have this kind of folk elements and uh, connections to the past, by sort of honoring the poetry that was written before, the people that come to these kind of places, they share something. They want to be more in tune with nature, they want to be more in tune with each other. And it is kind of like a counterbalance situation from modern life. And I think it's an important thing, that we remember to be in connection with our nature, our natural surroundings, and not oppress it and um, basically kill it, because of human dominance over nature, and that we kind of collectively start to remember that we are all part of one big cycle, one big circle, and everything is interconnected. So it also is, there's kind of the underlying morality of if we are all one, if we're all connected, if something else outside of me is just as much alive as I am, then I have to give respect to that. And that kind of messaging has always been important for me, and that's even in the earliest, the first band I had, like really it wasn't amateur, but it was really something I've never done before in my life. So everything was new, and for the first time to record, to bring an album out, to go live on a stage, there was that drive to do something that's gives a little bit of beauty and shows the beauty of the beautiful old traditions that are worth to continue being sung or played, and also to give our own modern touch to it, our reflections on it, or incorporate. What I do a lot is I write my own poetry and then add segments of poetry from the past that somehow ties into that, or I make kind of like new poetry that is directly inspired by the way skaldic poetry was written, or the type of riddles we see in those kind of Nordic texts. So yeah.
Yeah, it's perfect because we can feel that this affective memory in many points of your music, and that it's very close to the perception that we saw in the many bands, that they bring us history, but memory, the feelings of being part of these histories. We can say that we are in. We sit in front of a fire and we can learning histories of the folklore. It's like to doing these activities, and this is we can have this sensation when we are listening some of these albums, and this is very very special to saw that. And you are considered in some point the one of the pioneers of a genre that we call the dark Nordic folk. And in your opinion, how we can understand about this genre, and you define yourself part of this, or you say, "Oh, no, I'm much more pagan folk," or they are very close at the same genre? How do you see this expression in your music?
Well, it's always difficult to really define your musical expression yourself, right? In the end, it's in the eye of the beholder, and they have to decide your place in history as well. But the way I see it, we are using different terminology in this kind of musical landscape. We see Viking music, Viking folk, Nordic folk, dark folk, pagan folk. We see all these kind of different names for a genre, but there are so many groups, and that also means that the way you would categorize it sort of fluctuates a little bit. And I think it also matters what you accentuate, what you feel is important. And I've seen other shows discussing this very same topic, like what actually is a fair category. Because I, for many years, have called my music Nordic folk. Question is that actually accurate? Because Nordic folk also means the traditional Nordic cultural music and melodies that have been preserved for many generations. And what I do, of course, is I make new music. I write new words. I write new melodies. Everything's sort of new, but I touch base with what inspires me from the past, and I incorporate elements from the past, whether it be instrumentation, the way it's recorded, or the way the lyrics or the poetry is written, that directly mirrors or reflects back to that kind of reading up and researching uh, what what is in those ancient old texts. We know what we have preserved, and what we can still find there. And I think to get it, categorize myself as a pioneer, I can't say it for myself. I do say, like I said previously, all of us were kind of part of that rise. And there are, of course, certain groups who have given a very clear stamp on how that could look and sound like. But it's still a community, and it's still like a communal interest. And some people paved the way, of course, to say, okay, now it's easy to find these instruments everywhere, but it took a while for us to get there, and for builders to start building again, or people to learn how to build them again, or that there be enough interest for honing those crafts. And I'm all for it, because the more people that want to relearn or learn a skill again, that is very important. We don't have that many people anymore that know how to make a chair from wood, or how to make a shoe from leather. And this is kind of important for our human collective knowledge, that we preserve and honor these kind of crafts. So if making music with these instruments helps in any way to also enliven that kind of craft work, it's a very good thing. And also to broaden the amount of collective knowledge we have about playing this kind of instruments, and making music with this kind of sound. So yeah, genre pioneer, I leave that to other people, but it's been early 2000s until now that we sort of see the new cycle. But then you could also look back in music history and look at the 70s and 80s and 90s, and people who have pioneered there, and they should also be mentioned. So it's it's all fluent, is what I'm saying. It can be boxed in. Yeah, it's a motion of time.
Yeah, it's interesting because we saw that the Nordic music in actual days are have multiple scenes and multiple definitions, and sometimes we saw that one thing are very close to other, and this is difficult sometimes to define. Oh, people is only of this style and of the other. I think it's a mix of many types of style that compose all music of these groups of
Yeah,
this nowadays.
there's a certain zeitgeist idea behind the groups that are rising up today, that are making music with the same kind of old instrumentation, and that's important, and that's a good thing. And yes, we can of course debate a lot about how we should call it. It is definitely not just Viking music, but it is the terminology that you hear a lot worldwide, because it sort of makes it more understandable for people who have no knowledge about it and still want to put it in a segment. But most of these groups, they use instruments and songs and lyrics and poems from periods that are not even fixed to the Viking Age era. So yeah, it's fluent.
Yeah, it's fantastic. Um, and your first work, Live, was a band work, and for you, how this is how can I say, how this is your first contact with make the album and turn your lyrics and influence in music. How was the working in Live was a start for you?
Sorry, can you clarify that question with Leave? Because that was a group setting, and I'm now working solo. So, what was
Ah,
exactly the question?
was in reference of the first album
Yes.
with the group have the album list and
Yeah.
I think in the first album you working with your band, your first band, Live, right? In your
Yes.
album list. And How for you was the start with this work? Is your first work that you released as an album, and how was the working uh doing in this album?
Yeah.
Your impressions? How was to working with that for the first
Well,
time?
yeah, so the album Loose that was released in 2015, it's actually has been an album that became a solo album of mine, even though it was still released under the name Leave, because that was the company I'd set up and run. And I made it together with Christopher Yule, who is producer from Valraven and Heilung and Nebala, and also my music. And so on the Luz album, there's only two songs that have actually been written with the original. Well, not only well with the current members of Leave at that time, which is Terve and Numonen. And those two songs we kind of redid, me and Christopher, in Lava Studios in Denmark, because I have a very clear idea of how I wanted to sound like and have the songs be produced and composed in the end. And so my strong need to sort of make them sound the way I had envisioned them has actually been at the time sort of the breakup factor for the band, and for me the decision to go solo amicably, but in a way where I said I cannot compromise on this. This full album is me and Christopher now, so it's actually a solo album. So yeah, it's been interesting. Luz has been a very kind of person.
Kati?
Hey, we need to start recording again. I got kicked off, so yeah. Was
Yeah,
the
we
can
can
we?
continue.
Yeah, okay. Where was I? Oh yeah, so making loose. So making loose. Uh, that was a very kind of like personal album for me as well, in the sense that it really asked and demanded of me to persevere and continue even when the road diverges from the ideas that band members have, who feel it's too Scandinavian. And I felt, no, I want to go deeper into that Scandinavian world. I want to fully go there and do the research and explore it, and having Christopher Yule as a friend, as a producer, uh, he was perfect for that, because that's his specialty and also something he knows very much about. And so the two of us, we really carved and shaped the rest of the song demos that I had made on my own home recordings, the sort of the first texts and poetry and outlines of the music that I brought in. We just listened to it together, me singing in front of him, which was also a very scary thing to do, because I normally keep that really a little bit more private. And then him, starting to tap already, wanting to like put in on the right BPM to start recording some percussion with it, that could help me sing it in the studio, to have that like rhythmical drive and that kind of stuff. Yeah, Christopher really took me on the ride of what it's like to do a full album, bring in all your ideas, and in the time, it's not possible anymore today, but in the time it was really a 24-hour kind of circle, because I slept in the studio in a side room, and we just worked until we couldn't work anymore, and then sleep a few hours and then continued. So it was a very interesting way to sort of surrender yourself, and have that constant back and forth with someone, like, oh, now this could be good to add, and oh, let's have, okay, Kai is coming over for tea, let's ask him to do some vocals on Surin, because we know that he can incorporate that kind of wolf spirit that the song was also about, this hamrammer, this shape-shifting element. And so it was so organic. Yeah, no, Maria as well. It was part of her home, the studio area, so she was around a lot. There were also moments where we were just listening to the songs, and I was actually sewing a Viking dress, talking about Viking age period, like learning that from Maria as well, and then listening and then re-listening and then feeling like, oh wait, what if we add this there, another layer. And that's how we created, just to be almost in a constant motion. That was beautiful. And after Luz, I went into songwriting. I was so inspired by what Christopher All could do in his studio. I went into learning how to do home recordings and songwriting at home. I wanted to equip myself with the possibility to add all these kind of ideas already up front before going into studio, and to really be able to craft demos that already completely captured most of what I had in mind, including drumming, including the percussive elements, including different layers of instruments. So after Luz, after 2015 until 2018, I spent that time learning by a lot of trial and error. It was really, I really feel like I'm still beginning to learn it, but to produce those demos, to produce those songs, to record the sounds when I felt they could be uh, relevant for the song, and trying to be like so fully immersed in one song, like that resulted in Blood Billion. That was like sort of my, I would almost call it an initiation song, because was crafting that quarter of an hour piece of music, mostly at home with really crummy materials, and then taking it into studio with Christopher to make it audio quality wise very strong, and then to record with Gal. It was really a journey of sorts as well into my own underworld, and coming out, waking up and coming out, uh, yeah, learning skills to really bring to the record everything I can put in. And that's what I still do. If we look at the last album, Saula, that's where I had all the freedom to do that, because I could go as long and as deep as I wanted to into crafting these songs and shaping them, with also Finnish producer Jani Peu, shaping them into their final form, but being really sort of the director there.
Oh, that's very interesting because you have this point of with the band, but now they have the point of being a solo artist.
Yeah.
And um, this transition for you was a thing that was, how can I say that, you say, oh, oh my God, I want to be in a different territory that for me was totally different, and how can I find myself now in this process? Or
Hmm.
you doing in oh, this transition for you was very very nice to do it, and solo album that you are doing, or the two things are very close to doing a work with a band and now solo album?
Yeah, it's a completely different world. It's almost incomparable. Being in a group setting and rehearsing your songs and writing them together can be an amazing experience. Um, but I at the time I lacked I guess the information to really completely verbalize the direction that I had in mind. And I learned that I have very strong ideas. I have very strong, like, I know where it needs to go. How do I explain it to someone else? So being solo in making music, it gives me all the freedom in the world to be my own tyrant. I'm saying that with laughter, but it is a little bit almost like it's a dialogue in here that is constantly pushing to do learn more and do better, because it's I have to find a way to get it where I hear how it should be. So, but I don't know yet how to do it. So it feels like you're with two left hands and cross-eyed, or are working your way through. So it's not been easy road. I think, to be really honest, to anyone listening who plays with the idea of that's what I want to do as well. I want to be my own producer and do my own music. Of course you can do it, because if I can do it, anyone can do it. But it's not an easy road to take, because you will also be hit with many times a failure, and you are the only one who's going to pick yourself up, not your bandmates who say, oh, it's going to be better next week. You have to pick yourself up every time and say, I'm not giving up, I'm going to figure it out. And that is also, that's why I said initiation for Blood Billy. It's about surrendering and getting accustomed to your own voice and how it sounds, and not putting it into a shape that you think it needs to have because you appreciate the voice of someone else so much, but to learn to embrace your own voice and the way you come out and vocalize your text that you have written, or the source text that you are incorporating in that piece of music. And then, of course, yeah, there's a technical element, and that's something a lot of people want to skip. But there's quite a lot of technology still involved into crafting this kind of music, even though we are using ancient texts and old instruments from medieval era that are, of course, now made anew. So everything is, it's not that old. It won't break if I pick it up, like in archaeology. It's all new material, but there are instruments, reproductions from that time period. And so there's, what I'm trying to say is there's a lot you can dive in and put your teeth in. And it's one part, it's learning to master your instrument. And one part is learning to accept your voice, and then still put in the work to make it in a good pitch, and to find your way, your voice, find your voice, not someone else's. And then there's the technical aspect. How do I record in a way where I hone the energy of the song? I hone the mood of the person I'm singing about, or the person I am becoming while singing. I sometimes also call it, with a very hippie kind of word, channeling, like to sort of put your mind open and let some kind of like ancestral energy come through. So there's so many things that you can focus on and need to learn. And there will never be the perfect, it will never be, you will never reach the end of that. You will always want to improve on yourself. And so at a certain point, it's also about learning, I've said enough on this piece. I have to finish it and release it, maybe, and accept what it is now, and then move on and learn on. And so for people who are making music, it's also important to know, sometimes just release something and then learn on the next song again, maybe some other things you wanted to achieve in sound work. And lastly, and I really don't want to forget this, it's also about collaboration. Knowing who came before you, who have opened the pathways, and honoring that. So that's what I do when I work with Icelandic song. I work with Icelandic locals. When I work with Finnish song, I want to have Finnish local input in one way or the other. Like, I want to make connection with that land, or with someone who's really knowledgeable about a certain instrument and can play on it very, very, very well, to pay my respects, because it's one long lineage. So coming back to that whole idea of community that we spoke about in the beginning, it's all one, and we don't have to work together, but we are working together as a community. And I sometimes want to highlight that by inviting someone onto my track and by having those energies mingle. And of course, it has to fit the track. Like I had Carl Seglem on Bukenhoorn for opening and closing my album. I felt it's very important to have that calling and releasing sound that the Bukenhoorn can be used for, to call in people or a spirit and release them. Knowing many years before my album was ready, that's the two sounds I want to have, beginning and ending. And then closer to the final production, where the songs already have a shape, uh, inviting him and him saying yes. He's been so important for bringing this instrument back into contemporary music in Norway. That's been a very important part of his legacy, and he's an excellent player as well. That was just beautiful. And I remember when I got his tracks back, because we did this remotely, and I heard him play on that opening song and close go. I just was like, I was completely like crying, but crying of joy, because it was exactly how I had envisioned it. So it's the reach out to community and to ask questions and to sometimes, only when necessary, ask collaboration is, I think, also a very important factor.
Oh,
So
that's amazing. It's
yeah.
fantastic to know that. And it's interesting because one of the most things that I love to know and hearing in Sala, it's that we have a lot of guests that are very special that being part of this work. And for you, how is working with persons that are from different styles and different voices, and how this you have this idea to bring this for the album Sala?
Well, I'm very picky. I'm very picky. I'll be honest. Like I'm actually very picky in who I ask to to have on the track. And I need to have a really good reason. One being, it's an instrument I don't have myself, and I cannot play myself. So that's like when it comes to contrabass from Icelander Borgar Magnusson or Bukenhoorn from Carl Sagan. This, like, there's many instruments I can lay down on my track, but I do not have any knowledge about these instruments, and I do not possess them. So that is, one of the main marker, I would say. But secondly, is energy. If the person, I think, can bring a certain energy to the track that uh, can invoke something that is already part of that track a little stronger, and to sort of energetically tie it to a country, to a place, to a thought. And so it's nice to collaborate, but I'm very picky, and also sometimes a lot of it doesn't end up on the track. Like I had, for example, in Blåttbølge, there's an aulos. It's a double reed flute from history, and quite an important sound on the song of this whole 15-minute long journey over the sea. And he played most amazing stems of aulos, but they were all very well. They were not all, but a lot of it was very big on the main melody, and that's actually not where I needed to have the aulos for. I just needed to have the echo of it, like the energetic stamp of that beautiful historic instrument. And so we worked with just only a few segments that he did, which were really outstanding, and that that became the basis for this kind of movement, this flute, Aulos flute drone underneath that is also a little bit airy, because it's in a tonality that is just on the border of what we are used to. It's historical sounding flute. So it's beautiful, but I'm picky when I collaborate, and luckily I have people by now that are fully accepting of. I might use it, I might not, if I ask, and also it's also a business transaction at some points. That also has to be handled very, very well. It's something a lot of people easily forget, and we should not forget that. You know, time and energy have to be compensated one way or the other. So yeah, it's collaboration is a beautiful thing. I love to collaborate. I feel when I work together with someone on a song, it's almost a lot easier for me to access that creation mode in myself, because I'm more in my playful self. It's almost like there's less at stake when I work together with someone or for someone else's project on a track. If it's my own music, I can get really little overly in it and overly concerned and overthinking it. Then it's good when your producer steps in and says, "Okay, this is good. Now we're gonna use that now and finalize it." So it's, yeah, collaboration. It's also energy exchange, and I've been very fortunate with whom I had the opportunity to collaborate, whether that's in a recording situation or a live situation. I've been really, really fortunate there.
Yeah, and these collaborations are very fantastic because are very different from persons with different works that
Yeah,
are bring to this album, and they complement many aspects of the album. And this work is fantastic. I never hear something like this before, because it's totally different and very special to hear many voices with your voice, and with complement with these instruments that are very historical, and this work very brilliant to an album. And for you, you have some aspects that you research about mythology to compose uh, in your albums, in your songs, and in Salad, you have some special traditions for female figures in many aspects of the album.
yeah,
For you, how did you have this choose for preference for this side of mythology that is difficult to see in the album, that
yeah,
persons working with female figures in related to Norse mythology, and this is I think it was very beautiful. So that in an
yeah.
album.
The feminine skaldic perspective, or yeah, the female perspective. I felt it was important to enlighten the female roles of those kind of older societies. But of course, I'm very drawn to the mystical aspects and the folkloric, yeah, mythical aspects as well. So I really love to dive into, like, deeper into segments that highlight, for example, the Cirruses of the North, or the Spakona or Volva kind of figures that we see have an important place in that society, a very important place, and they were quite honored for their work and accommodated. And I whether it's direct or indirectly, it's something that always inspires me when I write music. That kind of archetype, to embody it, or to use a little bit of lyrical play that touches base upon maybe some of these traditions. whether that is prophesizing or cider, that kind of practices. They are directly inspirational to my work on Saula at least, but I think also in more works. And yeah, it's I love to play with that in a new setting as well. Like for example, the riddles that we see in Voluspa, which is like one of the most famous poems from this series, right? So that kind of riddle format was so inspiring for me. So I've taken that onto one of my tracks called Stone Pillars. There's it near the ending of the song, but actually it's woven into the whole track, all the lyrics. But there's near the ending of the song, there's quite a clear segment where there is this kind of new prophecy, almost a little bit in the closely tied to the style that we see in Voluspa. And so there's these direct references to the work of the summarizing work of Clive Tolley in the Viking Way, on all the many ways we've seen activities related to prophesizing. So it's like it's directly in my lyrics there. All the many ways we see in that kind of practices. Raise high over doors, raise high on the posts. I see a tree fall, an evening crow croaks. Who am I to know? Like, who am I to know? Who am I to show? It's not directly Nordic literature that is being used, but there is this mirror, this like sort of rewriting, new writing that really kind of is inspired by all of that kind of practices. So yeah, I like to play with words like that in all of the lyrics, and it's also the hardest to do. But because I don't want some things to be too obvious. But at the same time, there needs to be a little bit of the feel lifted for people to have the inclination to want to search, what is this about? What does it reference? Which saga does it reference? Or which Havamal verse does it incorporate, but in a different way of writing? So it's there's a few of my listeners who really want to analyze it, and they go on their own journey, because that's the nice thing about it, is that they go on their own research and they discover their own things afterwards. And so it can mean different things for many people. Like it means something for me directly, personally, but someone else who listens to it or to the same words might have a very different interpretation, because they are looking through their life experiences and their frame of reference and their, how they were interpreting these lyrics. It's different for everyone. So.
It's fantastic because we saw now aspects of the side of female figures that sometimes are not pointed in some points in some musics, but your album bring these aspects that sometimes are not showing in much more in music. We saw reference of battles, we saw references of the masculine style of live in the Viking Age, but the female part is, I think, it was a thing that was not much more compliment in some music.
Yeah, it's
In,
about time. It's about time that the women also vocalize
Mhm.
louder. I love that song, Sigitmir, also for this reason. It's the most upbeat track of that Saula album. Because there I also really take on this female perspective of, well, it's almost feministic. Tell them all, the man dogs that they are, is literally the chorus. It's about the burning of the temples in Uppsala, actually, but in general, the burning of the sacred, the trampling on that what is holy, of the feminine, of the earth, Mother Earth. And so I love to have just females on that chorus, and to have these Icelandic ladies opening the track with May and Magdu, like to raise the energy up for this kind of angry song. But it's more than anger. It's more taking a stand and speaking up for what is right, and speaking out against what is wrong. And of yeah, women have to do it.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And for you, I think one of the most biggest challenges I think when compose or doing some aspects of to play is to have the references of language that sometimes are difficult to speak or to learn about. How do you do this work to understand this language to put in the
Yeah,
songs and working with different because we have different idioms and that's
yeah,
a different words to working in the songs.
yeah, yeah. The songs that I have on the record have different languages, definitely. So we go from English to New Norse to Old Norse to Icelandic. So it's a lot of different linguistic work being done there. It's the short answer is through trial and error. It's something you have to learn as well. Like when I listed previously, you have to learn how to play the instrument, you have to learn how to sing and accept your voice. If you want to work with this kind of languages, that's another piece of the puzzle that you have to work with and solve, especially because as a non-native, like I'm not a Norwegian or Swedish person, I'm a Dutch person. So that's threshold one. And then when we talk about that languages, Old Norse, that also is like that's another threshold to pass through, another door. And of course, it's important for me to talk to professionals who have studied this field, also for the New Norse elements. To mention a few, I consulted with Christer Fasshus, a professor of Nordic linguistics. I think he was, well, when the time we spoke, he was still working for University of Bergen in Norway. Joshua Reed, Robert Kvalvak was his name. It's quite a lot of people. For Icelandic, Polly Vanine and Teresa Dröfen. Teresa is also involved with the local Ásutralag temple. People who are knowledgeable and native, they are definitely helpers. Eirik Storsund for some Nynorsk on Blottvilja, almost like with a 1600 touch. Was very, very sweet of him to help me there to finalize like the last little pieces of spelling corrections. And yeah, as a non-native, you still can make mistakes in this regard, even though you take classes. You really want to have someone look into it still before it's a final thing. And then when it comes to singing or speaking, vocalizing these languages, there's coaching involved. There's also just growing to be acquainted with these Nordic languages involved. I hear a lot of people that have very stern ideas about how it actually should sound. And then when you compare those very stern opinions, they're very different from each other, which leaves you wondering what is then the correct way. And so it's that is interesting that even the professors of linguistics still have different opinions about it. Or like when I did my Old Norse studies with a tutor who's actually based in Russia, had different ideas. And I think what comes into play here is, perhaps this is just a guess, but the language background of that person as well. And so, because we have abilities and disabilities in our throat from the way were raised in our native language. And for example, with Icelandic and Dutch language, they have this beautiful bridge where we have this sound called ui, like we see in Dutch huis, muis, kluis. And that is a sound ui that is also used in Icelandic language, and not in the Nordic languages. And then when I ask my Nordic friends if they can repeat a word the same way, they try and they can't. They can, but not exactly right, right? So it's different with what you have as an ability. You can train it, of course. It's something you can train. And the other way around, there's so many es and es and as and närmare. Like, so everybody says it differently, like even depending on which part of the country, they have dialects. Oh my god. So as a non-native, you're in for like a big chew of something you need to work out for yourself and decide. Again, you need to make a decision and say, is it good enough now? It is. And my friend Gal, he actually commented on my vocalization for Blood Pilja that he actually loved it, that it was a little bit more eerie, a little bit more warped, because it's a non-native voice that is vocalizing this new Norse from like 1600s kind of style of writing in New Norse from Storsund, from Storsund's help. So it's and I actually went into trance when I recorded that song. So there could actually be an element of something that is just a little bit more different than usual. But it's also just the Dutch tongue, and that gives it another twist. And we can fight it or we can embrace it. I have to work with it, so I work with it.
Oh, that's different. I think it have a lot of preparations to understand the language and have this work to work with the voice to prepare for the songs, and that's I
Yeah.
think have a lot of work to doing when we do this. I think
Yeah,
um
yeah, you have to be a mad person to do this kind of stuff on your own. Or, well, yeah, that's how I sometimes felt like I have to be mad to put so much time and energy into something, that nowadays doesn't necessarily give earns you an income of any sort. But we don't do it for those kind of reasons. This is passion for something. It's also the need to create and want to curate something beautiful as well. The whole package. I love keeping my mind busy thinking about things like that, no matter where I am.
no, yes, it's I think it's amazing in work, and I have a lot of patience to do that, to analyze every idiom, every some aspects of the language, because they have different structures, and I think it's a work that I admire. A person that's doing this is fantastic. And for our last question, can you explain a little about your instruments that you use in your songs, in your concerts? Can you explain a little about these instruments?
My which instruments I use? Or
Yes.
one in specific? Well, I base a lot of my work with playing nyckelharpa or other string instruments, more harpa. I also have of course, the voice itself. I don't just sing the main layer, but also the harmonies underneath. And then I have other instruments like drums, percussions, flutes, bone flutes. I have here this beautiful swan bone flute, which is a replica of a historical finding that was used. There's so much that can be a sound on the records that I make. Also, nature foley. Um, so yeah, hammer dulcimer. What else? There's many. It's too many instruments to list right now. And then there's instruments that are played by other people. Like I still don't own a tagelharpa, the instrument everybody wants to play when it comes to this kind of music. It's really time I have one soon, but there is actually someone making one for me. But yeah, it's I use more harpa and nickel harpa. But yeah, most of the songs come from maybe not even the instruments. Sometimes the instruments create the song. Mostly the voice and the writing, poetic writing, and being inspired by something of a historical book. So right now I'm reading up on Kalevala, and it's incredibly inspiring to see the way they do spellcraft. So that will be a whole new avenue to explore for me. Yeah, might use it in a song as well. But these instruments, they are not. It's not the biggest library of instruments in the world. I would love to have more, but they're pricey stuff. That is, you have to invest in something that's good. Also have Kraviklira here. Where is it? What's standing there? You know, that's I'm crazy enough to go to Norway for it and go to the builder's home. And I spent a week with him finalizing the build because I wanted to be involved in the birth of the instrument. And it's still one of the most beautiful weeks I've ever spent in Norway, in that beautiful area where he lives, and to be involved myself with the woodwork and the carvings on it, and stringing it up for the first time, playing it for the first time. It's so beautiful. Yeah, the instruments I own, they all have their own spirit of sorts, and they should be handled as precious items that also help you write your songs. But yeah, it varies per track. And then there's also just like what you do in the DAW, layering it out. So it's if we talk about my music, I still will say the soul of my music is mainly in the use of my voice, not as a expert singer, but as a vocalization of what I'm trying to convey. And nickel harpa, they create this beautiful melancholic sound with the reverbing strings. It's massive. It immediately transports you to this kind of place in your mind where you're standing on a mountaintop in the wind and playing these epic strings, and it's so filmic. It's so cinematic. I mean, instantly. So with very little effort, you already have a great sound there, actually. And I see people. I might go a little off track here, but I see, of course, a lot of people play them traditionally, and they play beautiful. I appreciate them so much for playing these fast polskas and polkas and local melodies. Yeah, it's all great, but I prefer people who play really from the heart, take it a little bit slower, because sometimes it feels like a speed contest, really. And then listening to a player or myself playing in a way where you can breathe in the sounds in and out that the instrument is making. And I often feel like many songs they're too rushed. We're so addicted to strong rhythms and dopamine like that. I yeah, it might not be a popular choice when it comes to streaming numbers, but I prefer to let the music I make breathe. Well, have a little bit more, yeah, timing.
Yeah. Oh, it's a lot of instruments. I never saw that we have so many that are part in the album, and they are in the concerts that I saw that we saw that typical instruments from these Scandinavian locations, and that's amazing to saw that. So many of them here in your room, and that's very fantastic, and know a little bit more about these instruments. So Kati, I have to thank you so much for doing this interview here in the channel. Was a big pleasure receiving you and learning many things about your songs, about your way of composition, about your history as a musician. And this is fantastic. I think people here in Brazil probably the parts that don't know about your work, you be very interesting now to meet your albums, your songs,
Yeah.
and that's fantastic.
Thank you for having me. It was really nice to talk about all these things, and yeah, it was good.
I will just stop the recording.